last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to a brand new edition of Dark Matters Radio here at the very beginning of the month of December. As we do this show, good heaven, it's going to be just 3 weeks. It will be Christmas. Hard to believe, but hey, the end of the year is fast approaching us. Now, little housekeeping for tonight's show. Unfortunately, Mark Center is still under the spell of that virus that he picked up a couple of weeks ago. I spoke with him earlier today. He thinks he's through the worst of it, and with any luck, he'll be rejoining us soon. Today, however, I was unavailable to get a call from Gary Kissel, and Gary had to call Bill. He picked up some kind of a bug. So good Lord, apparently it is out and about. Be real careful. You get out there and a bunch of people. These days, hey, there's no telling what you might bring home. But with that being said, tonight the show is going to be a fascinating one. My guest tonight is Mr. Michael Schratt. And Michael, who's been a longtime researcher, writer, presenter, has a brand new book out called Dark Files by Michael Schratt, book number 1. Now, this is about some of the more obscure but yet still very famous and even infamous cases in UFO lore going back decades. You know, for as long as I've been involved in this field, and it's been a while, I got to tell you, the majority of the audience, the majority of people that have an interest in this, for whatever reason, haven't had a lot of time to probably do research into this field. And once you begin, it is shocking at the amount of data and information and cases and witnesses that are out there in the field. When I began my in-depth historical retrospective, back in the later 1980s, I got to tell you, I was at the time, good Lord, I was blown away by the information that's out there. And it has always, at some level in my psyche, tickled me when the forces that be, the military, the government, the spokespeople that have tried to deny this phenomenon have claimed there is nothing to it. There's so much to it. It is genuinely shocking. And tonight, I think you're going to get a little taste of that. So without much more ado, let me bring my guest on, Mr. Michael Schratt. Michael, it is a distinct pleasure to have you on. How you doing?
Hello, Don. How are you?
Well, let me just say this, Michael.
Yeah.
There have been good days and then days that could have been better. Okay. That's about the size of that.
All right.
Tell us about Dark Files, Mike. What was it that caused you to begin this process?
Well, Don, I guess we could sum it up that I've always had this interest in aerospace and aviation. And
well, you're a pilot, are you not?
I'm a private pilot. That is correct. And of course, I went to all the air shows, Oshkosh Air Show for 27 years in a row, and was fascinated by the warbirds and the experimental and ultralights. But I also had this interest in all these secret aircraft. And I know you do too, Don. I know you do too, because you interviewed John Andrews. So, these things kind of merge together. You've got the classified aircraft and the UFOs, and they sort of merge together. And then living in the northwest suburbs of Chicago gave me the opportunity to be within an hour and 5-minute ride of QFOS, 2457 West Peterson Avenue in downtown Chicago, where they gave me access to all of the historical files. We're talking about 15 to 16 file cabinets full, 60,000 cases. And so over a period of 2 to 3 years, I literally pulled out every manila envelope. And if it had a real good detailed sketch, a flight path sketch, and then a 3-page report, I pulled it, did an AutoCAD drawing, followed up with a SolidWorks model, and then commissioned refined drawings and full color illustrations to make these cases come alive and preserve an important part of our national history. So that's been my crusade.
Well, this book is fascinating. I've already gone through the entire book since I received it. And by the way, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For sending that out. Now, before we even get into it, where can the audience find your book, Dark Files, Volume 1, A Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and Obscure UFO Encounters?
The book can be found on Amazon. All you have to do is type in Dark Files and my name. It'll pop up right away. It can be read in one day. It can be read in probably 3 hours if you really wanted to. It's simple. I give you the references. I give you the paperwork. I give you all of the resources of where I got the information. And so the case is presented, and then I give you the narrative and the description of the case itself. And so that's where you can find it.
When I was going through the book, a number of those cases I can recall, and like you said, they are obscure. A lot of them are obscure, or even today, of course, forgotten. But, with all the new people that have come into the fold, if you will, Michael, they probably have never even heard of them. But some of them are pretty shocking cases, and this is, I think, this is quite an outstanding bit of data that should go in everybody's library that have a library devoted to the UFO UAP phenomenon. Before we even get into that, however, I have a question that's very pertinent in today's UFO UAP climate.
Okay.
I recently wrote a paper on the disclosure topic.
Right.
Did I send you a copy?
Yes, you did.
Did you read it?
Yes, I did.
Okay. My conclusions were it's never going to happen. Now, I'd be very interested in where you come down on that, using the reasoning that I used in that document.
Okay. Well, in a way, I partially agree with you, Don. However, in another aspect, my personal assessment is that we're never going to get anywhere on disclosure until we reveal the truth behind the UFO crash retrievals, because they contain the bodies, the debris, and the craft. And so we have to get to the physical evidence and the people, the military witnesses who have firsthand knowledge and details regarding, putting these craft on 18-wheeler, tractor-trailer lowboys, shipping them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base, Homestead Air Force Base, MacDill Air Force Base, and then get a hold of their supervisors, and then those people can be subpoenaed and brought into congressional hearings. And barring anything less than this, Don, anything less than the physical evidence from the crash retrievals, I don't think we're just going to be spinning our wheels.
Well, one of my sorry about that. That's my beagle upset at somebody outside. Part of the process of this, though, is overcoming those security classifications, those security agreements. When I was in the Army, Michael, I was involved in a military intelligence organization and operation. This was in Vietnam during the conflict.
Okay.
And I got to tell you, those restrictions are pretty darn draconian, okay?
Right.
I feel that for those people to come forward with the knowledge that they have,
yes,
could be detrimental to not only them, their livelihood, their families, depending upon how draconian the powers that be basically choose to take it. Now, one of the items I pointed out in my document was this, that it goes without saying there is some type of core secret that is being concealed.
Of course.
And this is being protected by an SAP
right.
enclosure, a special access program.
Correct.
And unless you have a need to know, you never will. And that's why I think the bottom line is that they'll never allow this to become public. Do you have any rebuttal to that?
Yeah. Well, why would they be keeping it under wraps for all this time? Well, one of the reasons why is the propulsion systems associated with these vehicles could be exploited for offensive weapon capability. That would be one reason why.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But what about the conclusion I came to? That if, in fact, the United States government, the military, the intelligence people, do, in fact, have at least 12, possibly more, recovered wrecks, that the most logical for me conclusion to come to is that these craft, or most of them, or quite a few of them, were damaged by battle damage, and not necessarily from Earth-based military forces, but between two warring extraterrestrial species.
Yes, I noticed that wording in your report, and I thought it was very interesting. And the scenario about military involvement, I believe that holds true too, Don. I really do.
Okay.
I think there is a percentage of that going on. Absolutely.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's start taking a look at Dark Files. You brought a PowerPoint presentation.
That is correct.
Which I got to tell you, I'm pretty excited to see this.
Okay.
And if Chanel is right there, Michael, I think we can start with this, because I think this is a great way to get into the show.
Good. Okay. So I guess we're ready to start the PowerPoint presentation here. All right. So as you mentioned, Don, this presentation is called Dark Files, a pictorial history of lost, forgotten, and obscure UFO encounters. And I'm going to move to the next slide here. And just a couple of announcements before we begin here. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations, which originated from the actual UFO case files and eyewitness reports. And so these are some of the source material where I got this information. QFOS, NICAP, APRO, MUFON, Ivan T. Sanderson, The Invisible Residence book, which I highly recommend. Uninvited Guest by Richard Hall, highly recommended. David Marler UFO Research Collection, UFO News Clipping Service, Leonard Stringfield Collection, Gray Barker UFO Collection, that's Clarksburg, West Virginia, Boots on the Ground Research, and I'm going to provide you with all of the references and source material so that you can verify these UFO cases on your own. So that's the point I'm making here. All right, I'm going to start right here, Don. Now, this is February 3rd, 1983, Mobile, Alabama. Primary witness is driving home at night around 9 p.m., and she feels this boom, and she hears this audible booming noise. Her car starts shaking. She pulls off to the side of the road, gets out of the driver's side door, and kind of like kneels below, looked under the vehicle to see if the transmission had fallen out or some type of problem, and that was okay. So she gets back in. She drives another half mile down the road, and off to the right in this clearing, she sees this craft that you see on the screen right now. Now, this thing was about 210 feet long, 80 feet high, and we'll start at the top, Don. There was a transparent wraparound window section, and in back of these windows, there was and she described them, 5'10" humanoid-looking beings wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit, and they were walking around in what she described as an antiseptically sterile environment. Below that, there was another wraparound window. Below that window was a group of lights, and then composed of the entire exterior of this craft, Don, were these porthole windows. And she said that when she was standing below this craft, she could look up through these windows to the other side and through the porthole windows on the other side. And she said,
how close was she, Michael?
Well, about 50 feet below it. She was very close to it. This is a very close-up sighting. And she said that she could see the cross-beam and girder construction. And she said it reminded her of something that you would see at an East Coast shipping yard, where you would lay down the keel and then you'd have all these bulkheads and stringers. That's what she said it looked like on the inside. Now, below this first group of multicolored lights up on the front, there were these what looked like sandboxes that were 6 feet by 6 feet square. Kind of hard to see it, but they're in the front of this thing, and they had protrusions sticking out. And then she said that there was a door closing from right to left, and on the bottom of the craft there was a gondola with the same 5'10" humanoid-looking beings. And then on the top portion of the bottom gondola were multiple, and I'm talking hundreds of these 12-inch by 12-inch square, highly polished mirror reflective devices. And she's watching all this as it's going on. I'm going to move to the next slide here. And now you can see the front view. She absolutely saw this door closing from right to left. And then she said that the whole thing was fastened by these battleship steel plates, and it had these rivets on them, like these bridge rivets. So now what I want to do now is I want to go to the APRO bulletin. So this is volume 32, number 2, 1984. This is where we got the information to put the full color illustration within this PowerPoint presentation. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting here. Now, this is back in 1984 when they published this. And allegedly, this happened back in 1983. Now, Don, something very interesting happened to me about 5 months ago now. I was at a friend of mine's house, and we were doing another illustration. I get this instant messenger on my phone, and it's from this woman named Pat. And she says, Mike, I am the witness to your 1983 case, and I've been trying to contact you for 10 years. Don, it was this woman. It was the primary eyewitness. She got a hold of me, and we had this hour-long discussion. I couldn't believe it. I was shocked that, this woman would actually contact me. So we started this rapport, this back and forth, and she went over the case in great detail. I would talk about some questions I had, and then she would correct me. And then she said, Don, you know what, Mike? I still got my original drawings, my original sketches, and I want you to have them, Mike. So she actually gave me the original drawings from this whole sighting. Now, that's what I'm going to show you right now, and here they are. This is a little bit hard to see here, but this is the original sketch from the primary eyewitness, and you'll notice on the bottom right-hand corner, It was not 83, but it was January 1st, 1981. That was the actual date when this took place. So if you look off to the left, you can see this gondola on the bottom. You've got this kind of bulbous section up in front.
Well, who got the initial date incorrectly?
The April Bulletin did. They got it incorrect. It was 1181 is when it happened.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you look in the back here down, you've got this C-130 cargo door opened up. That's what this is, because this pathway or roadway went all the way through this craft itself. So this is kind of like the first one that she gave me. Now, this is something I also thought was interesting. There definitely seems to be something going on with at the end of the year or beginning of the next year, something happens. Like here, you've got 1181. If you look at Cash Landrum incident, that was December 29th, 1980. And then you've got Bentwaters, which happened within, like a day or so of Cash Landrum. All of these events happen like at the end of the year. So I'm going to go to the next one here. Now, this is her front view of this craft now. And one thing they completely missed on the APRO report is, Don, she told me that there was a bar that went across the front of this thing. And then embedded within this bar were these boxes of tubes, pipes, and cylinders. And on the front of this bar, there was what looked like cannons, but they're not cannons. I don't believe they're cannons. So this is her front view here. So she's got portholes, she's got blackout windows, she's got I-beams in here. She does show this.
This could be referred to as a mothership, couldn't it?
It could be a mothership. Absolutely. Absolutely. No sound, 7 to 8 floors high. All light moves side to side, up and down, mixed together. All right, so she's got this, the front view. And then this is a little bit more of a, I would say at a 10 degree front view. And what she's showing here is all these porthole windows and this bar going across. So I took everything from the original eyewitness sketch, and then I took what I knew was accurate from the APRO bulletin. We corrected all the errors, Don, and I had my good friend Rudy Gardea do a refined drawing with all of Pat's corrections. And here's what we came up with, and I believe this is kind of a world exclusive here. I want to mention here that she definitely said that this thing was fastened by these bridge rivets, these battleship plates, and she even said that it looked like this thing had been submerged in water and there were streams of rust coming off these rivets. That's what she noticed as well, like this thing was in the water for some time. So now I want to go to the final pencil sketch rendering by my good friend Rudy Gardea. She was driving a 1980 green Plymouth station wagon while she stopped and looked at this thing. And so if you look at the forward part of this, you can see this large bar, or you could call it a large extruded rectangle on the forward part of this. And we made it small in the beginning, and she came back and said, nope, Mike, that's not right. So we had to enlarge it. And you can see these prongs coming off of there. We've got the window up front. We've got the gondola on the bottom. And then we've got the tapered section with the aft C-130 cargo bay in the aft of this craft. So this is the best representation that we could put together based on the eyewitness testimony.
She was not physically contacted by any of the occupants?
No, she wasn't physically contacted, but she said that when this thing flew by, it made some kind of audible announcement that she couldn't decipher what it was. Like over a loudspeaker, there were these voices, but she couldn't determine what it was. But she was within very close range. And if you look on this sketch, she told me that she absolutely could not believe what she was seeing, and she had to kind of do a reality check. So she put her right hand on the hood of the car just to make sure that everything was still there and she wasn't imagining this thing. So we took everything from Pat. We took the refined drawing, and I went ahead.
One more thing, Michael.
Go ahead.
She had no ill effects?
No ill effects. Nope. No ill effects. No ill effects. Not in this case. Not in this case. All right. So we took all of the refined information we got from Pat. We took this drawing from Rudy, and then I went ahead and commissioned a full color rendering from my good friend Joel Payne. And Don, this is, here's a detailed drawing here. This is a kind of an enlarged view. Now you can see these prongs sticking out in this bar, but I want to go to the full color rendering now. And this is what we came up with here. Here we've got the green station wagon. Here she is at the front of the vehicle, and this thing is flying by. You can see this bar in the front, and we made sure to get these pipes and these cylinders, and that's something that comes up a lot of times. We hear on the Belgium Triangle, this is 1989, 1990, it had tubes, pipes, and cylinders.
Right.
Hudson Valley Boomerang between 1983, actually it was December 31st, 1982, all the way up to 89. That had tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of it. And then January 5th, Southern Illinois Triangle also had tubes, pipes, and cylinders. So here in this view, you can see this white light up front, and then there were blue lights and then red lights, and this entire interior was glowing from the inside, which illuminated these porthole windows as this thing is flying by.
My God, that would have been mind-bending.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's go to the enlarged view now, and now you can get a real good impression of what these pipes and cylinders look like. And we've got the humanoid-looking people that were wearing these one-piece tight-fitting flight suits. There was also a gondola below on the very bottom of it with the same people there. You can kind of see these battleship plates with the rivets. And then she said there was what looked like air conditioning units hanging down from the bottom of that lower gondola. So in a nutshell, this is the case from Mobile, Alabama, and this is back in 1981.
Oh, okay.
All right, so we're going to move on to the next one. USS FDR, November 1958, Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. This is at night. They're on a shakedown cruise. The primary witness is Chester Grzinski. And Don, in this case, there was this tremendous commotion below decks. Everyone was trying to get up to the flight deck here that you would see in this photograph, but you have to picture this at nighttime. So there was chaos and there was swearing and people were rushing up ladders to get up to this flight deck. And when they got there, Don, and this is Chester Grzinski, who's no longer with us. This is his original sketch. This is MUFON Sighting Report, August 8th, 1978. But if you look here, you can see what is about a 200-foot long cigar-shaped craft. So they saw this yellow light approaching the aircraft carrier, and as it got closer, this was no yellow light. This is about a 200-foot long cigar-shaped craft. And Don, it was emanating heat off the craft that these primary eyewitnesses could feel on their faces. So it is a CE-1, it's a CE-2, and then he said, this is from Chester Grzinski, there were somewhat looking humanoid beings walking back and forth between these rectangular windows in the craft itself. I'm going to take you to the enlarged drawing here. And here you can see me and 25 men seeing this, looks like this, and 8 to 10 p.m. And this was basically, they could feel this on their faces. Now, one of these beings raised his hand above his head like he was waving at the personnel back on the flight deck. It's just incredible. But this is his original sketch, and there's newspaper clippings that talk about this. So I thought, we really need to do a full color rendering of what this thing actually looks like if we were there, the best we can from the description. And here's what we came up with here. So now you can see this cigar-shaped craft. We've got one of these beings waving at the flight crew below. When this case was over, there were intelligence community personnel that went on the aircraft carrier and said, we want to pull the radar tapes, and we're investigating gambling on this ship. And that's the reason why they came on here. So I'm going to go to the next slide that shows kind of an enlarged view here. So you can imagine this thing happening at night with all these witnesses on the flight deck. And I personally tend to trust the assessment of at least 25 naval personnel who saw this. I don't think they're all lying down.
No, I rather doubt that.
Yeah.
Tell me, was there any indication, Michael, that this craft, this object may have come from beneath the ocean or in the air?
No, it didn't say it emerged from the ocean. It came from about on high and then converged on the ship from a higher altitude and then changed to a orangish yellow color and then almost took off like a spark on a grinding wheel. So it could have been a USO. I don't think that's the case here, but that possibility does exist. It certainly could have been, but that's not what was mentioned in the report here. All right, next one. And this is my favorite case of all here. This is March 23rd, 1966, Temple, Oklahoma. And we have a gentleman by the name of Eddie Laxon. He's the primary eyewitness, and he was working at Shepherd Air Force Base, and he was involved in electrical engineering. He was an instructor. So it's about 5:08 in the morning. The sun is still coming up, but it's still kind of dark out. Sun is just coming up above the horizon. He's driving down the road. This is March 23rd, 1966, Temple, Oklahoma, and something is blocking the road, Don. It is perpendicular to the road, and what he's looking at is this 75-foot long craft. It's about 9 feet tall. I'm going to start over to the right here. He said that the beginning front of this thing had a bubble clear transparent canopy that looks like it was ripped off a B-26 from World War II. After that, there were 2 beaming spotlights that were pointed directly forward on the craft. There were 2 additional spotlights that were shining downward. The whole thing was propped up on what looked like lunar landing gear legs, about 3.5 feet off the ground itself. Now, aft of these lunar landing gear legs, there was a air stair door with a man. Not an alien, not an extraterrestrial. It was absolutely a man. He was wearing 2-piece green military fatigues. He had a baseball cap with the bill turned up. He was shining a flashlight down on this air stair door. And then above this air stair door and slightly to the aft was this stinger or spire that swept back toward the aft end of the craft itself that terminated in about an 8-inch diameter sphere. And this, Don, is something that I see again and again with these craft. They have these stingers, they have these spires, they have these prongs and protrusions with spheres at the end of them. We keep on seeing this. Now, after this air stair door, there was a 3.5-foot diameter porthole window that was divided into 4 equal pie segments. After that, very interesting here, in black letters written vertically, TL4768 written on the side of the craft. And at the very end of the craft, there was what looked like flight controls that were way too small to be aerodynamically effective. So,
well, what you're suggesting by this description, this is a human example of some type of advanced technology.
That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Absolutely 100%. Now, when Eddie Laxon went back to the trunk of the vehicle and popped the trunk, that's when this gentleman in the 2-piece military green fatigues, basically it dawned on him that he's being watched. So he scurried up this air stair door, he closed the door, and then it says in the report, this is a United States Air Book Project Blue Book report. This isn't my report. This is the United States government, U.S. Air Force Project Blue Book report. He said in the report that there was a high-pitched drilling noise. That's interesting. And then this thing levitated off the ground about 50 feet, stayed there for about 20 seconds, and then Don took off like a spark on a grinding wheel and made no sonic boom. This is back in 1966. This all went down. So now I'm going to go to the drawing. This is the best hand-drawn sketch from Eddie Laxon we're ever going to see. So again, you can see the dimension here. 8 feet tall, 75 feet long. You've got TL4768 written on the side of the craft. You've got the beaming spotlights going forward and then vertically going downward. You've got the air stair door, and then X marks the spot where this military personnel with the green 2-piece fatigues was standing. So this is very good drawing. Now, however, if you look at the dimensions here, Don, you can see it's got 8 feet tall and then 75 foot long. It's out of scale. Now, I know why he did it. He ran out of room on this paper, so he can be forgiven. So if I took everything from Eddie Laxon's sketch, his testimony, the newspaper clipping, and the Project Blue Book report, and I kind of cleaned everything up, and this is my final drawing of what this thing looks like. Now, if you look on my detailed view, he said that whoever this military man was, he was wearing these insignias on his shoulder, these ranking insignias, almost like naval personnel. That's what he said was on his shoulder. And then he also said that I was so close to this guy and I could see his face, I'd recognize him in town later this afternoon if I saw him. That's how close this guy was. And this is all back in 1966.
Well, you know, Michael, this immediately takes me back to my initial research. Right. When I was trying to make a decision on whether I wanted to pursue this or not.
Okay.
One of my mentors, and I never knew him personally, but I read everything I could lay my hands on, was Donald Keyhoe.
Sure.
And Keyhoe, in one of his books, mentioned something, and I've mentioned this in passing quite a few times, that in about 1958, at his very last public appearance, Dr. Hermann Oberth,
yes,
who is considered the father of German rocketry, okay, and he was a Nazi scientist. I mean, let's be upfront. Was giving a press conference to a bunch of reporters. They were asking him about the possibility of going to the moon and what have you. This is 58, remember? And Oberth made a remark that has resounded with me for years.
Yep.
He basically said, well, we're working on anti-gravity. And basically, within a few years, this anti-gravity research should take us to the moon. And basically, that was then it. Okay. He was suckered into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Whatever he was working on was ultra top secret, never heard about it again. Didn't hear about anti-gravity again.
Right.
But now you're telling me this.
Yes.
And I got to say, how far did those guys possibly go, Michael?
I completely agree with the assessment of what you just mentioned and Hermann Oberth. Absolutely. You know, Don, it appears they've made a breakthrough. They've absolutely made a breakthrough. All of the newspaper clippings bear this out. At least by October 1954, we absolutely made a breakthrough for sure. Now, getting back to this spire here, what in the world is this spire with the ball at the end of it? Well, looking at high voltage electrical components, I think we conclude that partially these could be discharge spheres down. And I want to try to make the case here for this. If you look at this Wimshurst generator and all the components, you can see they've got these stingers or spires, and then they terminate in these spheres, just like what Eddie Laxon had talked about. And he also mentioned that as this thing was getting ready to depart, there was this high-pitched drilling noise, like something was revving up. That's kind of what you would see with this Wimshurst generator. You'd see this static electrical voltage charging up with this high-pitched drilling noise, and then the excess discharge would be pulled off on these spheres. I think that could be what we're looking at here. Now, I'm going to go to the map by Eddie Laxon. Now, here is his map, and you can see we're driving down the road on H70 heading westbound. He makes a little bit of a turn to the right, and that's where this thing was. So I thought, okay, now that we know exactly where this thing was, approximately 1/2 mile, let's see if we can get within plus or minus 50 feet of where this thing came down. And then I went to the Google Maps, and then from there, I went to the top view looking down. And Don, I believe this is exactly where it came down. So if we parked our car right here, I believe that craft would be probably plus or minus 20 feet from where this picture is taken right here. This is per Eddie Laxon's actual hand-drawn map sketch. So this is our site picture here, and this would have been early in the morning. Now, here is the index card. I'm not going to read all of this, but just the first part of the sentence here. It says, observer spotted object parked on highway in front of his car. Observer stopped car and got out to investigate, but as he got close to the object, a man apparently entered the object, and immediately the object began to rise from the ground. This is exactly what we talked about a little bit earlier here. So, of course, I started digging here, and I came across this newspaper clipping, Lawton Morning Press, March 24th, 1966. Temple man meets UFO on highway. And then we'll go to the next one here. Wichita Falls Times, March 23rd, 1966. Strange flying object sighted. And in these newspaper articles, they go through this case, but they have some very interesting points that I want to make here. And these are kind of like the bullet items here. Number one, William Eddie Laxon was a pilot since 1941. He had 8,000 hours of flight time and taught a course in aircraft recognition. So this is the guy that you want to have as a good, credible witness. Number 2, object rose from the ground with the sound of a high-speed electric drill, hissing geese, or of a welding torch. These are absolutely great descriptions, and I've got multiple cases, independently verified cases with the same tapestry running through these cases of these hissing geese noises, welding torch. Next one. The craft caused the hair on his arms and head to stand up. That's interesting. I've got other cases with the same thing.
Static electricity, right?
Yep, static electrical field all around the localized area on a lot of these cases. The man standing next to the craft was wearing GI fatigues and had chevrons on his uniform. That's interesting. It doesn't sound like we're talking about an ET here. Number 5, Laxon stated that he would recognize the man if he saw him in Oklahoma City tomorrow. That was interesting. Now, the Houston Post, April 10th, 1966. This is from the newspaper clipping here. Laxon, who is familiar with aircraft, said he had no thoughts about the craft being from outer space or even from another country. Quote, "It's an American piece of machinery," he said. "It's nothing foreign." So here's coming from a credible witness, electrical engineering background. He's got over 8,000 hours as a pilot in command. Credible statement here. Let's hit another one. The Daily Oklahoman, March 1st, 1971. Here's a good detailed sketch of what this thing looked like. And off to the upper right, that is our man here, Eddie Laxon. And it says, object sighting now rude, because he was getting calls at all the hours of the morning. He was getting calls from other foreign countries. All around the world, people wanted to talk to him. And he actually regretted coming forward because of the ridicule, because of, the constant hassling. So what this does, it actually adds validity to the case that he regretted even coming forward. So it actually adds to his credibility. He was not seeking fame or fortune. Now, here's what the newspaper clipping says, Daily Oklahoman. Quote, "What I saw was definitely not from space. The man was wearing fatigues and had a cap with the bill broken up like Air Force mechanics wear," Laxon said. It had common English letters on it. So just, basically drilling down on the point that this gentleman thought that, no, this is not an ET spacecraft whatsoever. And I'm making the point here, we should all consider very carefully the tremendous implications of what that statement really means. Because, Don, if we think about it, if we already had the technology to travel into space without using liquid rockets as early as March of 1966, then what was the Saturn V rocket for?
Public consumption, Michael.
Public consumption. What was all this for? You've got 7,700,000 pounds of static thrust. You've got these F1 engines burning this liquid fueled rocket. I mean, this is the way of the dodo bird. This is the dinosaur. We already had this technology, according to Eddie Laxon. Essentially, no moving parts. There's no solid rocket boosters, and there's no liquid rockets. This is all a facade, actually. Look at this, Don. You've got all these multiple single point failures. You've got turbo pumps. You've got valves. You've got pipes. You've got different fittings. Any one of these that goes wrong, you're going to lose the spacecraft and potentially the astronauts. Another one here. Combined thrust, 7.5 million pounds of thrust. Is all this necessary? I mean, this is just a ridiculous. We already had the technology, and according to your original statement with Herman Oberth, that they were already working on anti-gravity long before Apollo 11. So my question is, was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, were they briefed on this technology? What about Krista McAuliffe, who lost her life on January 28th, 1986 during the Challenger explosion? Were those crew members on Challenger, were they briefed on this? They weren't. They were completely in the dark.
I'll give you a quick little story about Buzz Aldrin. In 2014, I was the research producer on a television program that aired on the Sci-Fi Channel.
Okay.
Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Revealed. Do you recall that?
I'm not sure if I do.
Well, we were working on, it was the anniversary of the Apollo 11 touchdown. It ran, believe it or not, on July the 20th, the very day, in 69 that they landed.
Correct.
And I had been working since the early 90s on lunar transient phenomena research.
Okay.
Strange, weird things seen on the moon, what appeared to be artificial structures and so forth.
Right.
Well, I had discovered a photograph taken by a NASA lunar orbiter mission that clearly showed what appeared to be a huge pipe or tube running through a crater, Michael. Okay. And there were a bunch of other photographs that came from NASA archives that clearly showed oddities on the moon.
Okay.
Well, I was interviewed about this photograph with the pipe going through the crater. Immediately following my interview was Buzz Aldrin's, and the director and producers carried over a series of lunar photographs. Now, this was the second human being, an American, to ever set foot on the moon. And they placed those photographs in front of Aldrin in order to get his thoughts on it. Okay. And the man violently, Michael, twisted his head away. He refused to look at the photographs.
Isn't that odd, Don? Don't you find that?
He refused to discuss the moon mission. Refused. Wow. The only thing he would talk about was going to Mars. He wanted to go to Phobos. He wanted to see the so-called obelisk on the Phobos moonlet circling Mars. You're familiar with that, I'm sure.
I'm familiar with that. Now, Don, which anniversary of Apollo 11 was this?
2014. So it would have been what?
10
years? Let's see, 69, 79, 89, 99, 2009, 46 years, I believe. 45 or 46 years.
Okay.
So it's crazy. I mean, but his reaction will stick with me forever, Michael.
Yeah, it's very odd.
That told me a lot. Now, in my research, now this is just an aside. I don't want to get sidetracked, but in my research, I discovered that when they went to the moon, those lunar missions, all of those men carried weapons down to the surface. Were you aware of that?
No. Are you talking about 45 caliber pistol?
I am.
Really?
Yes.
No. Guess I wasn't aware of that. Why would they need that, Don?
Excellent question. I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know. But according to NASA, because I talked to public affairs, in case they were coming back from the moon and they got stranded in a jungle somewhere, this was the reasoning they gave me, then they would have a means to defend themselves. And when I mentioned that all of those missions landed in the ocean, how would they get to the jungle? They had no coherent response.
Wow. Okay. So what you're telling me here, Don, is that mankind's greatest achievement, we have it July 20th, 1969. And on this anniversary you mentioned, you've got Buzz Aldrin there, and he's presented with 8x10 black and white glossy photographs of the lunar landing, and then he pushes the photographs aside in disgust?
No. He didn't push them aside in disgust.
What did
he
do?
Violently twisted his head away and refused to look at the photographs.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a bizarre response, to say the least. All right, continuing on here. September 10th, 1976, Calusa, California. And on this particular case, the primary eyewitness was in his house that you see off to the right here. It's 11:30 p.m. And all of a sudden, the air conditioning unit goes out, and concurrently, the lights go off, the TV goes off. So he goes back to the circuit breaker in the back of the house here. He's looking at the circuit breakers, and then he immediately realizes that the hair on his arms, the hair on his hands, and the hair on his head not only is standing up, but is crackling. He was completely engulfed in the static electrical field. He looks up, and Don, he sees a 140-foot diameter dish-shaped craft hovering above him. And it had this dome on top, but not the dome that we're all familiar with. It had a dome that looked like a lemon squeezer or an older orange juice squeezer. It had these ridges on it. On the top of the ridges was a spike or spire. Now, it also had these conduit pipes that came down to frayed edges. And then on either side of the craft, there was these prongs sticking out. And he's looking at all of this. And off to the left, there is a identical shaped craft, but it's half the diameter, and it's pulling power off the 500,000 volt power line. So this is a CE1 and a CE2. Now, something interesting happened. While all this is going on, he notices that these prongs on the left and right hand bottom side of the craft, they retract up 90% into the craft itself. Now, concurrently at the exact same time, these conduit pipes that have frayed edges, they also retract up to the craft. And then these hatchways open up on the upper and right and left-hand side of the craft, and these gooseneck lights shine down on the scene itself. That's what you see here. Now, we're going to go to the next scene. So he's looking at all this, and he's getting pretty concerned here. Here is the drawing from the Sun Herald, Calusa, California, May 29th, 1979. And if you look closely here, you can see these conduit pipes with the frayed edges, and I thought, you know what? There's got to be a reason for this. This can't be by accident. There has to be a reason for every component that you see on this craft, especially these conduit pipes with the frayed edges. What are these things? Well, we're going to look at this here. All right, so again, this is a detailed view here, an enlargement of these frayed edges. So after I was giving a lecture about this at MUFON Symposium a year and a half ago, this gentleman came up to me and said, you know what, Mike, I know what those are. And I said, tell me, what is it? He said, it's a static wick, and it's used to dissipate electrical charges. And the same thing is used on the trailing edge of commercial airliners. You'll see that there. So I started digging, and I found what these things look like. So here is a static wick, identical to what's described in the drawing. And then here's the part number, 110001, 192, and this is the contractor. Now, obviously, it's a different contractor then, but these things do exist, and they match the form, fit, and function of what was described by the primary eyewitness. So he goes into the bedroom, he wakes up his wife and two kids, they pull back the blinds, and now they're looking at the large craft, flanked on either side by two smaller craft, and they're pulling power off the 500,000 volt power lines. And then something really interesting happens. This is all back in 1976. The large craft goes from a complete dead standstill to hovering over the low rolling hills in the background that are about 25 nautical miles away. It does it in about 1 second and then repeats the operation, comes back in less than 1 second. So in under 2 seconds, Don, this thing had transversed about 50 miles and made no sonic boom back in 1976. They were already having this. So at this point, the primary eyewitness said, you know what? We're getting out of here. I have no idea what this thing is. I'm fearing for the safety of my family. Let's get out of here. So he piles the entire family into the pickup truck. So you've got the wife on the passenger side. You've got the two kids still in their pajamas. Now they're screaming down the road at 90 miles an hour, and that large craft starts following them. It goes over the cab of the vehicle, off to the left where the driver is, and then goes back up to the top of the cab, over to the passenger side, then back over to where he is. And then, you know, when they get to the end of the road here, where the neighbors are, and this is the newspaper clipping here, it's San Antonio Express, February 6, 1977. Family tells of terror as UFO chase car at 90 miles an hour. You know, they're screaming down the road here. So they finally get to the neighbor's house. They slam on the brakes. 4 eyewitnesses get out. So you've got the father, the wife, the 2 kids. They knock on the door of the neighbors. 2 other eyewitnesses come out. So there's 6 eyewitnesses that see kind of the back end of the large craft depart at a 45-degree angle at a high rate of speed, all back in 1976. So it really looks like they absolutely have made this breakthrough of this electrogravitic magnetohydrodynamic propulsion systems, anti-gravity, you could call it, at least by October 1954.
Well, we are just about at the break time, but before we go to break, Michael,
Yes.
you probably are too young
Okay.
to recall there. You may not have even been alive, but in 1965, have you ever heard of the Great Northeast Blackout?
Absolutely. Yes, I have.
Well, according to a lot of research, and one person that wrote about it was John Fuller, who wrote about the Betty and Barney Hill case, basically tracked it down to witnesses who saw a UFO, or possibly more than one, what appeared to be draining power from power lines, which apparently overtaxed the system, which caused the breakout. Hey, we can pick up there when we get back.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, my very special guest, Mr. Michael Schratt, and his new book, Dark Files, Book 1, Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and otherwise obscure phenomena. We'll be back after this break. Stick around. And we are back with my very special guest, Mr. Michael Schratt. Michael, a little further info on that Great Northeast Blackout. It's my understanding that there was a genuine baby boom about 9 months later.
Okay. Wow.
So that's a little something to play in your mind, but
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
Okay.
All right. Good.
We're gonna get Chanel to bring back up the PowerPoint. There we go. Take it away.
All right, good. Let's go on to the next case here. May 16th, 1967, Falcon Lake, Canada. This is a fairly well-known case, 40 feet in diameter. So our primary eyewitness, Stephen Mekulik, he was a rock hound. He was looking for different types of minerals and different types of rocks for his collection. And he looked up and he saw two 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. One departed, the other one stayed and landed about 250 feet from his location and sat there for 30 minutes before he even walked up to it. See, he's seeing this thing at close range for a good 30 minutes. Now, he was wearing jeans, he was wearing boots, he was wearing a plaid shirt, he had very thick, you could call them nice working gloves. He had a welder's goggle on to protect his eyes from chips from the rocks and the hammer. He was prepared for doing all of his investigations for these minerals he was looking for. Now, he's walking over to the craft and he's looking at this. It has an upper dome with a flat section on top. It has these slits or slots wrapped around the outer circumference of the lower dome. There is a doorway hatch that opens up with this purple or violet light that comes out. And then about 10 degrees off to the right clockwise is another what looked like hatchway, but it was much smaller, and it had these perfectly CNC drilled 16th diameter holes with a perfect pitch to them, about 1.5 to 2 inches pitch. So it was like a CNC just punched these things in there. So he's looking at this craft, and we'll go to the next slide. He's basically investigating to see if he could find anyone in here. Now, the dimension on this hatch is about 2 feet wide by 3 foot long. The other much smaller hatch or vent exhaust port was 6 inches by 8 inch. Now, he did hear unintelligible language coming from this thing and laughter. Now, he couldn't determine what the language was, but he did hear some type of language, and this is kind of a blow up of what it looked like of him looking inside here. Now, what happened next is this craft basically levitated off the ground about 12 inches, rotated in the correct formation that this vent or exhaust port lined up with his chest, and down there was a exhaust and some type of a heat burned him, set his clothes on fire. He immediately got sick. He did vomit. He got sick, and the hole pitch pattern of the exhaust vent lined up perfectly, making an imprint on his chest that matched the hole print section on this vent. I mean, it was a 1-to-1 match. And this is all going on. He had a difficult time getting back here. And here's the blow up of what this looked like. And we'll go to the next slide. Here's a couple of different renderings of what this looked like. And you can see him looking inside. I mean, incredible case. He died just recently, not all that long ago. And then here's some detailed drawings of some debris that was recovered. That's the medical report that shows the red marks on his chest. And these concurrently appeared and disappeared on his chest for the entire duration of his life. So this is definitely a CE1. And
what kind of a moron would you have to be to walk up to something like that and poke around at it? I mean, my God, here's something totally unknown to you.
Correct.
Yeah, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Oh, gee, I wonder if I can get away with this. Oh, oops, guess I didn't.
Well, you could see that he had a curious bone in his body. He probably wanted to know what it was. Who knows? But this gentleman has remained credible all the way to the end. He wrote a book on this, describing this. So I thought, okay, what other physical evidence can we pull up? Is there any other evidence that we can find that would at least lend more credibility to this case? So I went to my good friend, Antonio Huneas, and he pulled up from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police the actual landing site with the circle in the ground. And you could see this here. You can see the outline of where this thing lands. So we do have some evidence to further support this case. Edmonton Journal, March 24th, 1967. Foul smell persists. UFO sighter suffers chest burn. This is his original.
That's the photo I recall from this case.
Yep. That's right. So his sketch is, it's a really good drawing, actually. All right, next one. April 24th, 1964, Socorro, New Mexico. We've got policeman Lonnie Zamora is chasing a speeder. And off to the right side of his vision, he sees this off-white egg-shaped craft that is kind of going over some low rolling hills. So he gives up chasing the speeder, and he goes on this unimproved dirt road over a couple of low hills, and there's some shrubbery, kind of a desert terrain, and he comes across this approximately 18 to 22 foot wide egg-shaped craft. There were two small-statured humanoid-looking beings wearing a one-piece tight-fitting overalls. They were white in color, and this thing had an exhaust port on the bottom of it. There was what looked like this extended telescopic landing gear, kind of like something you would see on a lunar landing mission. And when he gets close to this thing, these two beings notice that he's being watched by Lonnie Zamora. So they scurry up into the craft, and then it gets interesting because there's this loud roaring noise that comes out of this exhaust port. A blue-colored flame comes out of the bottom of this thing, and I want to talk about that. Now, here's another artwork description that shows you what this may have looked like if we were there. So he got within very close proximity of where this actually happened here. And now you see this exhaust port with this ear-splitting roar. Again, why would this be an ET craft with a exhaust nozzle, something that you would see like on an Apollo craft? Next one here, New Mexican, April 27, 1964. Flying object visits region. And you see off to the left here, Lonnie Zamora. Now, the credibility of Lonnie Zamora is what really lended to the authenticity of this case being a real case. Jalen Hynek was brought in. He did investigations. And in a lot of these cases, you have to go to foreign publications to get even more detailed description. Here's the drawing that they put in there. Now, there was an insignia on this craft that we're going to talk about a little bit later here. And so he had to basically jump on the ground to take cover as this thing is lifting off the ground. So now what I want to do, Don, is take a real good look at these landing pad legs, a real good detailed look at these landing pad legs. Now, I'm going to ask the question here. Does this look like an extraterrestrial landing pad from a civilization that could be 1 million years ahead of us in technology?
No.
This is another one we want to look at. Socorro symbol, April 24th, 1964. So for decades, we've been led to believe that this is the actual insignia. So you've got this TP with this rainbow top. Now, if you take that insignia that we've known for all these years, And Don, if you rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, you get what I'm showing here on the left. Now, if we flip this TP device and then we cross this little hash mark, you get the second one. Now, if we transpose the letters down, you get CIA. I always thought that was interesting. So is there
very
a man-made component to this, Don? Are we looking at something man-made here? All right. Now, according to a recent book that came out that goes into great detail about this, and this is from pretty much the last surviving witness that got there literally within hours of all this going down, the actual insignia, and this is from Ray Stanford, was a V with a hash mark. So you've got an inverted V with 3 hash marks. That was the original insignia. So the question is, and this is from Ben Moss, Not of This World, the 1964 Socorro UFO with Humanoids, Witness Police Lonnie Zamora. Why did Lonnie Zamora sign off on a fake symbol? The symbol was changed by U.S. Air Force Major Holden for the simple reason that providing a fake symbol, if any other cases came up and a witness reported the fake umbrella symbol, they would know that the witness was lying. By Lonnie signing the fake symbol, maybe drawn by Holder, Lonnie was signing a contract with the government to keep his mouth shut on the symbol. It was country, God, then family in those days. And this is an email I got from the author of this book. So this is his hypothesis of why we've been led down this goose chase about this symbol. Now, if you look at, Don, this map of White Sands Missile Range, and if you look in the upper left-hand corner, you see Socorro. Now, if you go down to the legend on the right hand, you can see that it's scale in miles. This is within 5 miles of the outermost left-hand portion of the perimeter of White Sands Missile Range. I think that says a lot. I think we're looking at a test flight of a man-made vehicle using a hybrid propulsion system. All right, we'll go over a couple of bullet items here. Object was seen within very close proximity to White Sands Missile Range. Number 2, object featured retractable landing gear. Number 3, UFO featured inverted barred landing gear pads with sharp 90-degree straight corners. 4, a mysterious metallic slam noise was heard just prior to liftoff and departure. So is that them closing the door? And then seconds later, another metallic slam was also heard. So I'm asking the question, is this when they engaged the locking mechanism? So that's slam number 2. Then we had a very loud roar was heard prior to liftoff, which changed in frequency from low to high. And then a blue colored flame was seen on the bottom of the craft. This is basically, Don, the identical blue colored flame that Betty Cash described during the Cash Landrum incident, December 29th, 1980, Huffman, Texas. So you can see this legacy of research that they were starting in the 1950s, 1960s, going into the 1980s. And that checks out by what you were talking about with Herman Oberth. Now, you look at this book cover and do a detailed view and enlargement of this pad. Don, I don't think we're looking at an ET landing pad here. I mean, it's too straight. It's got 90-degree corners. It's got sharp angles. So if you look at the imprint that was made, and then you do a plaster Paris mold, and what you'd end up with here, I'm going to do detailed drawing here. This is the actual imprint this thing made. If you did a SolidWorks model, what you'd end up with is this. Now, if you take this SolidWorks model and you go to a 3-view drawing, this is what you end up with, Don. I don't believe we're looking at an ET landing pad. This looks like something that was done on a CNC lathe device, a milling machine, certainly a milling machine for sure. And you've got these 90-degree corners. You've got sharp angles.
The only question I have, Michael, is, and I agree with everything you've just laid out. I agree with every bit of it. The diminutive people or entities that were on the craft, they were not, apparently, according to Zamora, they were not, 5'8", 5'10" feet men. So what, if it's ours, what did they do? Did they employ dwarves or what?
I'm glad you asked that question, because Jack Pickett, who is a retired naval personnel. He was on the destroyer during the Pacific, and he was at MacDill Air Force Base as the base publisher. And in September 1967, he was at MacDill Air Force Base, and he was given access to 4 dish-shaped craft that they had parked at the base scrapyard. They were about 24, 60, maybe 75, and then the other one is about 130 feet in diameter. And he said that they used small-statured test pilots on the smaller 20-foot diameter craft because they had a hard time fitting full-size pilots in the cockpit. So we have a legacy of these small-statured test pilots being involved in classified research into these type vehicles.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
That certainly would answer the question.
Yep, that's right. Okay, Army helicopter incident. So this is one of these ironclad cases that even Philip Klass could not debunk. Even he had to admit, because of the credibility of the pilot, the co-pilot, the other crew members that were there. So this is the Mansfield, Ohio incident, October 18th, 1973. So you've got a Bell Huey UH-1. It's at night. And the approach speed on this was about 700 miles an hour. And it was the co-pilot that alerted the pilot. This is Colonel Coyne. He said, you know what? We're on a collision course with this. I don't know what this thing is. So he pulled back on the throttle. He pushed stick forward. They're in a dive now to avoid this 50-foot long cigar-shaped craft that has a red light on the left, a white light, and a small dome on top. And then the next thing they find out is that this green-colored beam is shooting down toward the helicopter, hits the helicopter. Now they're raising from about 2,200 feet above the ground to about 3,100 feet. There's this thump. The green beam goes away, and then the craft flies away. And there were ground observers that saw it as well. Let's go to some other ones. This is Fate, August 1978. Major Coyne and the UFO, the true story. So they talk about this in great detail. Let's go for some newspaper clippings here. Daily Call, October 22nd, 1973. Helicopter crew estimates UFO speed at 600 miles an hour. The credibility of the pilots here. It made it all the way to the United Nations. So this is 1978 at the UN, left to right, Eric Gray, Jalen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, and Colonel Coyne. So in this case, it went all the way to the United Nations. This is one of these ironclad cases. Definitely the credibility of our military pilots and crew members was certainly that added to the case. 1897 mystery airship wave. We can't talk about UFO cases without talking about this. So you've got basically things starting in Sacramento. You've got San Francisco. You've got Oakland, California, where we're talking about thousands of reports from people living in these towns where they saw this gondola-shaped craft. It did appear to have some type of balloon on top. There were wings. There was a rudder in the back. But then they had these high-intensity beaming spotlights on the ground back in 1897. So people were screaming. They were going from one side of the street to the other. They had covered wagons that were flipped over. And then they reported that the people on the decks of these craft were these eccentric, well-dressed inventor types with tuxedos and top hats. And then they said that there were big black dogs right next to the pilots. And then there was laughter coming from these craft. And then they said down that there were anchors being lowered from these craft. Let's go to another detailed drawing here. You can see these anchors being lowered down. And then also these lanyards and then laughter coming from these craft. A couple of quick highlights. The wave actually started November 18th, 1896 in Sacramento. Object cast down brilliant beams of light on the city before it moved toward San Francisco. Number 3, eyewitnesses described the craft as being 150 feet in length with 4 rotor-like arms. In some cases, anchors attached to ropes were dropped from the mysterious craft, and laughter could be heard originating from the interior. By 1897 May, almost all of the sightings stopped. So if you dig into these newspaper clippings, and a lot of people have done some good work on this. This is the Record Union, Sacramento, California, November 23rd, 1896. A genuine aerial ship over Oakland, the strange visitors seen there on Saturday evening. And this is kind of a detailed view. Now, what's interesting is in a couple of very rare instances where these things landed in the daytime and the people of the town ran up and saw the pilot was wearing, quote, smoke-colored glasses. So I don't think we're talking about an ET spacecraft here. You can see these beaming spotlights coming down, almost identical to what we saw in the Hudson Valley boomerang wave. This is between 82 and 89. Now, astronaut Gordon Cooper, he plays a significant role in all this. He had two events that we're going to talk about here. Number one, he wrote a personal letter to the United Nations regarding UFOs in 1978. And in 1951, over West Germany, he had an attempted UFO intercept. Later in 1957, he was involved in a UFO that landed at Edwards Air Force Base. And all of this is talked about in his book, Leap of Faith, where he goes into both of these in great detail. So it's 1951. It's West Germany. On two consecutive weekends prior to this event, the meteorologist at the West German base that Gordon Cooper was based at alerted the pilots that they are seeing these fleets of UFOs, these silvery dish-shaped craft with domes on top, flying over the airbase. This happened for 2 weeks. And so Gordon Cooper, he turns to his wingman and says, you know what? Let's try to intercept one of these things. And so they climbed into their F-86. They're full power forward. They climb at a 45-degree angle of attack, trying to intercept these things, and there was no chance, Don, because these things could move backwards in flight. They can make these 90-degree left-hand turns. They can make these swiveling maneuvers. There was no chance of an intercept whatsoever. This is back in 1951. Corvallis Gazette Times, October 11, 2004. Cooper brave for speaking on UFOs, and this is what it says here in this newspaper clipping. Early in 1951, Cooper and other personnel several times cited an entire formation of circular objects passing over their Air Force base in West Germany. Quote, we never could get close enough in our Sabre jets to pin them down, but they were round in shape and very metallic looking. Next one, UFO landing at Edwards Air Force Base, 1957. So in this case, they were setting up precision landing equipment at Edwards Air Force Base, and they had still photography, they had motion picture cameras set up, and this 25-foot diameter dish-shaped craft hovers over the dry lake bed. It retracts these landing gear legs, lands on the dry lake for 60 seconds, takes off, retracts the gear, and then departs kind of at a high rate of speed. And Don, they got it all on motion picture film reel. They've got this footage, Don. And no one to this day has been able to get this footage or has access to this footage.
Well, as an aside, my wife and I, when we were publishing UFO Magazine, we knew Colonel Cooper.
Yes.
And we went out to his office in Van Nuys, and we spent an afternoon, and I questioned him greatly on this.
Okay.
And he said when he made the call that he was required to make to advise whomever that they had this film,
Correct.
they told him to get it ready to be picked up. Somebody was going to come and get it and not to view it. But he told me when they brought him the film after it was developed, he did look through it with his naked eyes.
That's right.
And he saw this thing. But he said then it was picked up, it disappeared. He never heard another word about it. And somewhere in a vault, this film is sitting there.
That's correct. So we have to figure out a way down for our senators and congressmen to get access to this material so we can have congressional hearings and bring out the cameramen involved and any other evidence associated. And they've got vaults full of this thing, warehouses full of these gun camera footage from World War II, from Korea, from Vietnam, from
I'm sure all these men today are probably no longer with us.
Yes, you could be right. Yes.
60 years ago.
Been a while. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We're long since past chasing the Undertaker, and that's why it is imperative that we take the bull by the horns and make a management decision and push to get this information dislodged. Absolutely. This is the final curtain call on disclosure here. Again, same article here. This is October 11, 2004. Cooper saw the film as soon as it was rushed through the development process. Quote, it was typical circular-shaped UFO, he recollected. Not too many people saw it because it took off at quite a sharp angle and just climbed straight out of sight. He reviewed the film a dozen times before it was forwarded to Washington, never to resurface, just like you talked about, Don. All right, next one, Father Gill sighting, June 26, 1959, Papua New Guinea. Now, in this case, there were at least 24 additional witnesses in conjunction with Father Gill, and we're talking about a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It looked like a two-tiered wedding cake. So bottom section was 35 feet in diameter, upper section was 20 feet in diameter. It had these prongs or protrusions, which I don't think are landing gear legs, coming out of the bottom of this thing. There were 4 humanoid-looking beings on the top deck of this craft, and there were 2 at the forward section. The other 2 were a little bit more obscured back, like they were working on instruments or mechanical devices. And when this thing got close to the vicinity of Father Gill, he basically raised his hand above his head and was waving to the gentleman on the top of this craft, and he waved back to Father Gill. In fact, this case is also known as They Waved Back. That's what this case is called. There was a 45-degree blue light color beam of light shining off the side of this at about a 45-degree angle. And what I want to do now is go to the detailed view, enlargement of what this craft looked like. Now, they had seen similar craft, but this is the first time that this thing got within close proximity, and at least 24 additional witnesses had seen this. Now, what's interesting is, and I'm going to go to the next one here. Here's the map that shows you where this thing came down. I'm going to go to the next one. And if you look on the lower right here, you've got Boanai, you've got Mount Nuinui. I can't quite pronounce that, but this is the vicinity of where this all went down. This is the detailed drawing from the map. And then we can go to Father Gill's original sketch. Now, when I brought this to the attention of Paul Hynek, Jalen Hynek's son, he said that 73 time frame, I think it was, where Father Gill had gone to Evanston, where they were living, and they were having dinner with Father Gill. And Paul was sitting right next to Father Gill. He was laying this whole case out. And when I heard that from Paul, that the Father Gill was not seeking any attention, no fame, no fortune, he just laid it out as it happened, I thought, wow, I think we've got a real credible case here. Here's an International UFO Reporter, their drawing, November 1977. So you see all these witnesses that saw this craft. So it's a very good case, probably top 10 within ufology. Now, we also want to talk about JAL Flight 1628, November 17th, 1986. This is Paris to Tokyo over Alaska. And in the beginning part of this particular case, which is historically significant, the pilot reported seeing these 2 coffee can looking devices that were cut down to the last 50%. It looked like it had this black electrical tape running from the top vertically down to the bottom. And then these amber lights that were alternating flashing. And these things got so close to the 747 that they could feel the heat coming off this into the cockpit onto their faces. So it's a CE-1 and CE-2. These craft did fly around the craft itself, the 747. And here's Miami Herald, January 4th, 1987, FAA reviewing data from night Japanese pilot reported UFO. So we had the onboard radar of the 747, we had civilian radar, and we had military ground-based radar, independently third-party confirming that this was something that actually took place. UFO following Japanese cargo jet tracked on radar, crewmen saw it. Lincoln Journal Star, December 30th, 1986. Now here is the actual pilot sketches. This is looking out the left-hand pilot window, and you can see his actual sketches of what this looked like. Now, when these 2 craft departed, a little bit later on, coming from the port left end of the craft itself from the back, he said that there was this massive acorn-shaped UFO, at least twice the size of an aircraft carrier. So we want to go to the next newspaper clipping here. Controller confirms spottings. The Herald, December 30th, 1986. Here is Captain Kenji Teruyuchi describing what this craft actually looked like. Now, he's lost his job from Japan Airlines, and then Richard Haynes had to go to bat for him, and he regained his wings. So he was able to fly again. But let's go to the rendering here. And this is off to the left, at least 2 times the size of an aircraft carrier as he saw this thing flying by. Credible pilot reporting. We've got other pilots that have seen similar craft, and we can tend to trust more the credibility of our naval pilots and commercial airline pilots because they make good witnesses. All right, next one. Late August 1970, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. This was a chiropractor who was riding a horse, and he saw emerging from this cloud this 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. I'm going to go to the next drawing here that shows you what this thing looks like. This is a bottom view looking on the bottom of this, and it had these twin counter-rotating exhaust vents and then a 10-foot mushroom diameter dome on the bottom of the craft. And he said that as it got close to the vicinity of where he was, his horse started going crazy, and there was this blue coronal discharge right around the leading edge of the craft itself. And then this thing slowly went back into the cloud, and then the cloud departed at a slow rate of speed. December 26, 1972, Venezuela. Interesting case. So you've got the father, you've got the wife, and you've got the young daughter. They're at the top of their 14th floor apartment complex at night. They're looking off to the right, and they're thinking, you know, right around this time, there's a commercial airline that always passes by. So they thought this must be what they're seeing. But in this case, there was this orange colored light that they thought that one of the engine nacelles on the commercial airliner was on fire. But as this thing got closer, this was no commercial airliner. This was a 50-foot long elliptical shaped craft that had twin cast iron exhaust ports with these lasagna noodle flames coming out of them that don't look like campfire flames, but look more like an electrical discharge. And he also said, I'm going to go to the next one here. Here's the detailed view. You can see these cast iron exhaust ports. He said that there were twin half hemispherical opposing domes with an electrical discharge spark gap mechanism going on between these half hemispherical domes as this thing is flying by. So he tells his daughter to run next door to the neighbor's house to get some binoculars. And as this thing is flying by, he gets a real good view of this thing. And here is what these half hemispherical domes look like with these spark gap mechanisms going on. And then he said, I saw these cast iron exhaust ports with these, you could call them lasagna noodle flames coming out. They had a definitive shape to them. And at the back of these flames, it looked like, Don, someone took a butter knife and chopped the flame. So this wasn't a campfire. This was like some type of atomic discharge.
Plasma?
Plasma discharge, something other than a campfire flame. Yes, something similar to that. Yes. Now, I'm not going to go over the whole 3-page report because there was a 3-page report, and I dug this out of the QFOS archives. I don't think it had ever seen the light of day. It was sitting there for decades. Here's what he said at the bottom of his 3-page report. This is from the eyewitness. Much more description could be given, but would serve little purpose without something tangible, and the main points have been touched upon. However, may I add that these two craft, because there were 2 of them, described were identical finite pieces of hardware and probably not too far beyond something any one of our top aircraft plants could produce. I thought that was interesting, Don, where he mentioned this.
Well, now up to this point, Michael, you and I have pretty much basically agreed on various conclusions about this, that a number of these cases appear to suggest human technology, not extraterrestrial.
Absolutely.
What would your breakdown be at this point between suspected ET and suspected human technology?
Good question. Well, looking at all of the evidence, Don, and I'm not saying by any means that everything we see here is a man-made craft, because these sightings date back to Columbus. We've got sighting reports that go back to the ancient Egyptians, the Romans. They talk about flying shields. So I don't think we're talking about man-made craft on everything. But I'm just looking at the evidence here, probably a significant majority of these things are man-made, up to and including 90%. That's a high percentage. But
that is, I find that astounding, Michael.
I know it sounds like a big number, but look at what the witnesses are telling us on a lot of these cases. They're telling us that these things are tested on Thursday nights. Okay, we're hearing that there's this low frequency electrical humming noise, like a transformer or a sewing machine. We've got tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of these things. We've got flashing lights that go off in sequence. We've got the reds go off, the yellows go off, the blues go off, the whites go off, all in sequence, and then they repeat the pattern. And then we've got boomerang-shaped craft with wings attached to the main part of the craft. Even Stanton Friedman said that wings on an extraterrestrial spacecraft could only be for decoration. This is what Stanton said. So when you put that all together,
unless they choose to utilize it within a planet's atmosphere.
That's true too. I suppose that's true too. But looking at a whole, when you take a cross section of these cases, there is a significant percentage, Don, that lead you to the conclusion that it's a man-made technology.
Well, okay, whatever it's worth, my thinking on the entire phenomenon has changed dramatically since the late 80s, when I became professionally involved. Okay. Now, I'll tell you what I think. Right. Originally, I was convinced nuts and bolts technology in a lot of these cases from off-world. But as time went on, at UFO Magazine, we were exposed, good God, the various cases we came across. My thinking evolved to the point where I began suspecting some of these cases might in fact be interdimensional. But it was in recent years, Michael, when there was another possibility, and this is why I'm mentioning it. I want to get your feelings on it, that some of these cases, what if they were from a formerly extremely advanced human civilization that for whatever reason was forced to leave the planet because of Earth catastrophic events, i.e. the Younger Dryas event 10, 11,000 years ago. But then they came back and for whatever reason went underground. Have you ever considered?
I totally believe that is a worthwhile scenario to investigate. Absolutely, Donna. I concur with you on this. I think that is a one possibility for sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right.
Yep. I'm agree with you on that. Yep.
Good definitely. To know. Okay.
All right. August 13th, 1947, Twin Falls, Idaho. This is the famous Snake River Canyon case. Now, the primary eyewitness was kind of on the upper ledge of the canyon. His two sons were more toward the river section. They were wrapping up the rope because they just finished going down the river. And all of a sudden, Don, something that can only be described as Abraham Lincoln's top hat, chopped down to the last 1/3, comes screaming through the canyon at 1,000 miles an hour, Don. It's banking and jinking through the canyon like a Top Gun F-14, but at low altitude. It's a couple hundred feet below the top of the canyon, and it's navigating the whole canyon, following the river at 1,000 miles an hour. Made no sonic boom. This is 1947, August 13th. I'm going to go to the next one here, and you can see the Times New, August 15th, 1947. Flying saucer reported flashing down canyon at 1,000 miles an hour. 2 others are seen. Let's go back to the first one. Don, who had the technology to build this back in 1947? We had basically the X-1 at that time, the Bell X-1.
The Nazis?
Build this back in 1947, and the eyewitnesses reported that there were what looked like engine pods on either side of the center line. They looked like engine pods, and there was an atomic flame that came out of the back of them, not a exhaust like a afterburner, but this was
advanced avionics by the Nazis.
Well,
I'm just, the stories have been that the Nazis, Kampfler, I believe it was, who headed up the Nazi program into these experimental machines. He disappears. Okay. The bell, der Glock. Okay. It's just a thought. I'm not saying that's what it is, but possibly, yeah.
Oh, well, this is what the evidence is leading us to here. Here's another detailed description here. This is August 13th, 1947. You can see the front view and these pods on the side. I don't think we're looking at an ET spacecraft here. This is a man-made technology again and again here. Next one, July 24th, 1948, Montgomery, Alabama. This was a watershed case. This is kind of a turning point in this whole field. Okay, so you've got this DC-3. This is at night, and both pilot and co-pilot see a torpedo-shaped craft at least 100 feet long. It has these burning magnesium white lights on the side of it, and they had to make an evasive maneuver, go into full left turn as this thing made a hairpin turn and almost hit the DC-3. Now, why this is important? Because when they landed and they filed a report, the credibility of the pilot and co-pilot could not be challenged. This time it was a pilot that saw this, not someone from the ground, the flap of 47. Now we had credible pilots that are reporting, and this is kind of the first beginning stages of pilot reports, but they could not just discount the pilot and co-pilot. Here you see the drawing of what this thing looks like as it's making this swooping hairpin turn here. Fiery sky monster reported seen just southwest of Montgomery. This is Alabama Journal, July 24th, 1948. Eastern Airlines pilots claim craft traveled over 500 mile an hour back in 1948. So someone is building these craft. And this wasn't a shooting star because it made an abrupt turn. So this is something we need to consider. Now, Hudson Valley Boomerang. This is all 83 to 89 timeframe. And this is basically, we've got 25,000 eyewitnesses over almost a 10-year period. What they reported is a massive boomerang-shaped craft with a triangle trailing edge. It had multicolored flashing lights on the bottom. It had a transparent section allowing eyewitnesses to look up inside through the transparent panels that exposed this cross beam and girder construction. There were tubes and pipes on the bottom of this. This is what the reporter, initial witnesses are telling us. Now, this is March 24th, 1983, Taconic State Parkway. This was on a Thursday. And Don, do you know what happened a day prior to? Any idea?
In 83?
Yeah, what happened on March 23rd, 1983? Does that ring a bell at all?
Not offhand, no.
Okay, well, Ronald Reagan gave his address to the nation introducing the Star Wars or SDI program. 24 hours later, this thing hovers over the Taconic State Parkway. It parks itself 50 feet above the trees.
Fascinating.
Completely silent. People pull off to the side of the road. They slam on the brakes. They get out of the vehicle. They're looking up at this thing, and it's shining a spotlight down like it's looking for people on the ground here. And when they look at the bottom of it, Don, they said that there were these transparent panels, and inside the craft, they had this cross beam and girder construction. We just lost Dennis Sant just like a year ago. He recently passed away. He was one of the last surviving original witnesses, and he described this beam construction, these girders on the inside of this thing here. All right, now we move on to February 26, 1983. Another good case. This is Monique O'Driscoll. This is in Kent, New York. She is with her daughter, also named Monique, and they're just driving down this road. And I went here a couple of weeks ago with Bill, and what they discovered going to a place called White Pond is this boomerang-shaped craft that flew over their vehicle. It made a 180-degree turn. It parked itself above the frozen pond, and Monique said that she could see the reflection of the lights on the bottom ice below the craft that was shining these lights down. And it had these reds, yellows, greens, blues, and whites that went off. And she said there were pipes, there were cylinders, there were vents. It had this diamond grid work on it. This is coming directly from Monique O'Driscoll. Belgium Triangle, November 29th, 1989. And this is in the Sun, July 23rd, 1991. There were 5,000 eyewitnesses that saw multiple triangular-shaped craft that were the size of a football. It had a white light at each corner. And you see here, UFO drama, thousands watch in awe. And if we go to the full-color rendering, now the F-16 pilots didn't get quite this close. This is November 29th, 1989, and March 30th, 1990. Belgian pilots tracked this thing, pulling multiple Gs, like 40 Gs, and they reported tubes, pipes, and cylinders on the bottom of this craft. Eyewitnesses near the vicinity of this craft reported a low-frequency electrical humming noise, like a sewing machine or a transformer. So again, we've got 5 of these incidences now where there's these tubes, pipes, and cylinders, and this low-frequency electrical humming noise on the bottom of these craft.
Yeah, that was a that was an extraordinary case. And where were they over? What city?
I think I might have a map here. Wapen, Belgium, something like that. I've got a map that describes where this took place.
Which was the headquarters of?
I don't know. Tell me, Don.
NATO.
Okay, good.
Now, this is curious. If you wanted to send a message, okay, and suddenly you're over the capital of NATO,
right,
flying these exotic objects, these craft, and F-16s,
right,
can't get up to you. You're telling people something.
Yeah, you're telling them that we've got a technology that is light years beyond anything that you would see at your local air show. And we could be looking on a blue on blue situation, basically demonstrating the technology.
And I thought about that immediately as it happened. I thought about that.
Sending a message for sure.
Yeah.
This is another case that I dug out of the QFOS archives. Been sitting there for years. I don't think it was ever seen the light of day, but this is May 5th, 2003, Helena, Missouri. This is the original sketch by the primary eyewitness, and he saw this massive triangle-shaped craft. I'm not going to go into all the details, but look what he says here, Don. It says basically that when this thing passed over, it shook the entire house, and then it allowed picture frames to fall off the living room wall. This is what he says here. It shook the entire house. So as this thing flew over, there's this low frequency rumbling noise, shook the entire house. Now off to the right here, he indicates multiple times that this thing had bridge rivets, like something you'd see off the Golden Gate Bridge, and they were rusty. These rusty steel bridge rivets were fastening this whole thing together. So I took his drawing, I cleaned it up, came up with this one here. Now you can see these bridge rivets all the way here. There was a catwalk that you could walk down the length of this thing, and it was about the size of a football, triangular shape. And I've got the detailed description, his exact quote. Craft caused pictures to fall off living room wall and shook entire house as it passed by back in 2003.
Doesn't seem like they came from Vulcan, does it?
No. This is another one of these cases that is screaming a man-made technology. And what these witnesses are telling us as these things look like these cross beam and girder construction. That's what we're seeing on the inside of these craft. Again and again, these rusty rivets is what we're hearing from these eyewitnesses. Here's my cardstock model that I put together just to give an example of what this thing actually looks like. Now, this is another good case. November 22nd, 1985, 15 miles northwest of Madison, Wisconsin. I did track down a newspaper clipping that kind of verifies this case, but Here is, Don, what the original eyewitness said when he looked at the bottom of this thing. He said, quote, "The underside of the craft resembled the back of a refrigerator, like a collection of condensation pipes that ran back and forth." This is something that we've heard multiple times here. So, Don, when you put these cases together and we hear about these pipes and these cylinders, I'm thinking, there's got to be a reason for these cylinders and these pipes and these zigzagging refrigerator tubes. Are we looking at a liquid nitrogen cooling apparatus that takes this whole thing and turns it into a superconductor? Because superconductors only they become conductive when they're super chilled down to minus 279 degrees Kelvin. So are they using liquid nitrogen and pumping it through these to turn these into superconductors? I think that might be a possibility. Just throwing it out here.
Yeah. You very well may be onto something there. Absolutely.
Because we keep on seeing these again and again, these pipes on the bottom of these craft. So, is this what we would expect to see, Don, on the back or bottom of an extraterrestrial spacecraft? I mean, is this what we would think to see? No.
I'm very likely.
This again is screaming a man-made technology here. Wisconsin State Journal. This is the one I was referring. UFO 2 are sighted, and this is the one that talks about the triangular-shaped craft. A woman sounded normal. She talks about hovering over a home in Milwaukee Street. They talk about this. They talk, in other words, they're talking about the triangular-shaped craft, and it's the identical date as the sighting by that worker here. Now, we want to go on to this case. This is August 25th, 1990. I was given this case by David Marler. He was very kind of him to give me this case. This is a 30-year veteran of the police force, and he's with his wife. It's at night. I've kind of illustrated a little bit early here, but they just come out of down a Fleetwood Mac concert, and they're queuing this big line. All these cars are trying to get out of this concert. And they're going down this dark, long road. They look off to the left, and then emerging from a cloud is this massive black triangle-shaped craft. It has an indented section, and there's a white light at each corner, a white light on the bottom, and then these rectangular windows that go the length of all of the flat sections of the triangle. And here's the detailed drawing. This is August 25th, 1990, near Barnsley, England. And you can see this cross-beam and girder construction that he described, and this indented section. He said that there were two humanoid-looking figures looking outside these rectangular-shaped windows. And then I'm going to go to his quote here. This is from the actual eyewitness. This is what he said, quote, "The side of the craft appeared to have several illuminated windows, and I saw 2 to 3 figures that appeared to be human. Certainly nothing about the figures made me think they were anything other than human, reinforcing my belief that the craft was a military project."
Okay. All right. We are unfortunately, and boy, I'll tell you, I would love to go another hour, but we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. Michael, What is your bottom line about this?
I think I'm going to exit out, minimize, and then go back into Skype, and hopefully I will be able to see you, Don. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see me?
Let's see here. Am I go back on here? I don't see you right now. Let's see. Am I back in here? Loading. Okay. Enter studio. Are we back? We're back. Okay. I got you, Don.
Okay.
Good.
What is your bottom line on this? The suggestion, the implication is that we have a vastly superior technology, for whatever reason, is being kept from the public. I totally agree with your assessment that a lot of these, in fact, are very, very likely human technology. Why are they? What is the technology capable of, and what are they hiding, Michael?
Okay. Good question. Good question. Number one, they're testing these because they're brazen and they can. That's one. Number two, they want to control the high ground. Any military force that controls the high ground wins the war. So they're not going to bring out these assets, these crown jewels, and silver bullets, unless there's a real need for it. This is not a Saddam Hussein thing. This is not a Osama bin Laden. This is something on a completely different level. When they control the high ground, they control the war.
Well, good God. Look, we're down to roughly a half a minute. Tell everybody where they can find your book.
You can find my book on Amazon, and my YouTube channel called Blue Room Media is on YouTube. Yep.
Dark Files, ladies and gentlemen. Fascinating, a hell of a fascinating book. I highly, highly recommend it. Michael, this has been a fascinating 2 hours. I want to thank you deeply. We definitely must have you come back. And any final thoughts before we've got to close out?
Thank you, John, for giving the opportunity to be with you tonight. Great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Stick around. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that's it until next week. In the meantime, have a fantastic week. Keep your eyes pointed up, and we'll catch you next time around. Thank you.